Hey now, Rob here, Rob School of Music, and I cannot wait to talk to the legend Trans-Siberian Orchestra, Savatage, Mr. Chris Caffery.
Great to see you. It's great to be here at the School of Music today. I'm excited to answer some of the stuff that I see that you talk about on this show. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Awesome, dude. I can't wait to hear what your answers are going to be. So we're in Suffern, New York, brick and mortar school here. A lot of our students come from Mawa, so I feel like there's a connection there with you, perhaps. But
well, I had more of a connection actually with Suffern because I was born in Suffern, New York.
Ah, Good Sam. Me too.
Oh, yeah. I was born at Good Sam, and actually, my mom had been having a little bit of, she's getting to that age, so she wound up going to Good Sam for something. And it was funny because when I went in there, I told the people at the hospital, this is just recently, about a month and a half ago, I said, I've been in this hospital twice in my life, and both times it was because of my mom. It was pretty interesting. Yeah, I grew up in Mawa the first just about 15. It was 14. I was 14 and a half when I headed not too far away, only 30 miles away to Goshen. And that's actually where I wind up, where I am now. I'm speaking to you from the place where this room here is where me and my brother kind of made a TV room, and we would hang out and watch Star Trek and the Honeymooners. And then we had a couple rooms the other way that were rehearsal rooms and stuff like that. But I've turned this room into my studio, and I got a bar room and a really cool.
Rob here, Rob School of Music. I'm going to take a quick minute of your time interrupting this video to let you know that my guitar course, I Can Play Guitar, is on sale currently at icanplayguitar.com. This is everything you would learn in your first year of guitar education with me in a convenient choose your own adventure program. It's going to tell you all sorts of songs, the names of the strings, scales, customized backing tracks, all of your chords, bar chords, power chords, open chords, scales. Did I mention scales? Customized licks that I wrote just for you guys to learn that you can play over any type of music, and it is on sale right now. icanplayguitar.com.
Going on out there, and I wrote a ton of music in this room. This room was where me and John Oliva came to this house in '92, and we wrote a lot of Dr. Butcher stuff here. But then I was writing a ton of music for my solo stuff. I would come home on the weekends because I was living in the city, but I would come up to do the lawn and just be upstate for the weekend. And I would use a little digital 8-track, and I had a V drum thing, and I just programmed in a beat, and I would just put I changed the beat. I'm like, let me write a song that's kind of fast. And I put a beat in, and I would just go and record over and over on that. And that's where a lot of my solo stuff was coming out of there. And then I did, since I'd been back up here, I did the last couple Spirits of Fire, the Spirits of Fire stuff here. And, the last couple of my solo records and all my singles and things. It's a great writing environment down here. And my dog likes it. The ghosts like it. So it's a good
I love that, dude. I mean, so there's lots of connectors right there. So my school is across from the Lafayette Theater, Main Street, Suffern, spitting distance from the hospital. So that connects there. I currently live in Harriman. I ride my bike on the Heritage Trail up to Goshen where it ends. So I know everything you're talking about, man.
Yeah.
Let's go back.
I'm on the Heritage Trail. That's a nice place. Sometimes I think they may regret not keeping passenger trains on some of those lines with the traffic and things on the road, but it's definitely a nice thing to have when you go up and down that trail on your bicycle.
Absolutely. I imagine we maybe cross paths. Who knows? Let's go to the beginning, dude. So the first question I like to ask, and it's, there's no wrong answer to it, but at what point in your life, what was it that you saw? Was it a record? Was it a show? Was it a song? And you're like, that's what I want to do with my life.
I think it started with the record. Basically, I had a lot of Beatle records when I was a little kid, and I'm talking, 3, 4, 5 years old. We had a little turntable, tiny portable one. And I can't remember which Beatle record it was I think they were on the cover. It was silver, and it might've been a little bit of 3D, but they were there with their guitars. And I always liked the more heavy Beatles songs. You know, I liked Help and Revolution and you know, the ones that just got Paperback Writer and things like that that were just that way. And my next door neighbors, I want to say I was probably about 7 at the time, had bought me Wings Over America as a Christmas present. And that was when I really heard, like, you know, Live and Let Die and Rock Show and all these things. And that record was just like every form of rock and roll at that point in time was on that album, even little elements of heavy metal and stuff like that. But when I was in kindergarten or first grade, I can't remember what, it might have been first grade, but I had sang Help for Show and Tell. So I was already in that frame of mind. And then there was a store in Oakland right down the 202 that way that was called the Sears Surplus Store. And it was kind of like, you know, the outlet of what Sears was not selling in the big stores or the cheaper items or you know, my family didn't have a whole lot of money. So there's a lot of sale things. Then I just know there was this little electronic section in the middle and there's guitars there. And I used to stare at them. I was always infatuated with the electric guitar. I thought it was cool. Like I said, when I got that Wings Over America and I saw the double neck and the Les Paul and the lasers and stuff like that, it was just kind of, you know, I'm like, all right, that's what I think I want to do. And then I cut a lot of lawns, raked a lot of leaves. And when the first time I went to a record store with my own money, me and my brother bought Kiss Alive and the first Boston record in the same day.
Nice.
You know, imagine that, like that's what you picked up. And I just lost it when I heard Kiss. I was like, you know, that's the heaviness of that album was, I'm like, there it is, you know, and I just loved it. So yeah, the funny thing is I never had a plan B, which I probably should have, but you know, I didn't. And luckily I didn't wind up needing it. And I just did not plan on anything else. And I was a pretty smart kid. I mean, when I lived in Mahwah, I went to high school in 8th grade. When they say you had the little bus, I lived too close to the school to get the bus, which is funny because it was just like 1/2 a block shorter than the distance that they let you take the bus, which was like 2 miles. Now they drive the kid to the end of the driveway.
Yeah.
So I used to walk to school in the rain and watch the buses go by. It was crazy back then, but you literally got suspended if you got on the bus without needing, you know, supposed to be on the bus. They cared that little back then. We were on our own, but yeah, it just was the only thing I pictured I wanted to do. I had high school courses in 8th grade and I was first in my class and I had 156 IQ and I had absolutely no desire to learn anything more than I already knew once I got past my sophomore year of high school and we moved. But I was kind of mad at my parents because they were leaving Mahwah and I was leaving my friends and I came up to Goshen and I had so many credits that I only needed, like, my senior year was 2 years together and I had like 2 different English classes because you needed that. And I think I needed 2 different history classes. And then I had like study hall and a guitar class and earth science. So I'm like studying rocks. You know, I just really was like, my brain was so focused on that. And my club band, or the little band with my brother, which was called ANTI, Anti, we were opening up for I'd open for Metallica and go to school. You know, it was kind of that thing. You know, I was that kid. I had a jacket with my band's logo on the back and, you know, I was walking around school, this, you know, 15-year-old, 16-year-old kid that wanted to be a rock and roll star. And it was pretty cool. In my yearbook, it said that I wanted to see my band at the Garden, but it was listed as that band Anti, but I did wind up getting the headline the Garden with TSO a couple times. And it was pretty cool to see that thing you wrote in that piece of paper, you know, you were 16 years old, wound up actually happening. So I was pretty excited about that.
You manifested it, man. That is the dream. You have achieved the dream.
Be the ball.
At what point, so you're doing your own band, you know, what was the practice routine like, you know, getting your chops up, you know, quite obviously you shred like a motherfucker. So like at what point did that transition into Savatage and onward?
Well,
Were there steps in the middle?
My family didn't have a lot of money, so my lessons were limited. And once I moved out of Jersey, I didn't really know of any teachers here. And I actually started teaching when I was in high school. So it really was like, the abilities to find somebody that were able to help me to learn more. I just grabbed records and would play along. Now, as I got older, I realized that some of the ways I was using my hand or some of the scales or some things were just a little bit different, but I had a good ear. Then I was able to get really close, and I had a really good natural way of playing heavy metal music. I was a great heavy metal rhythm player before I became, a great heavy metal lead player. I just was able to play and write that music. And I used to write songs that sounded like the old Metallica and Megadeth and stuff like that at that time. And my brother, who's the drummer in my band, he wanted to sound more like Whitesnake and this and that. So I would write these songs and he would say, that sounds like that Metal Massacre shit. Well, the Metal Massacre record had, Metallica with the singing on it, and Exodus, I think, might have been. I was just like, that's what, maybe I would have zeroed in onto that world and came out. But I just stayed where I was, and I wound up being in the right place at the right time, and I had enough looks and talent to get me into a pro gig when I was 17.
Wow.
It was pretty fortunate with that. My brother was 2 years older. The drinking age was 19, and it was being grandfathered in when they changed it to 21. And there was no picture license yet required for New York. So I had his license. I had his social security card, his credit card. We'd go, I'd go watching Vay Malmsteen on a Thursday night, be able to walk in to the club because I had that, And so I was watching these bands, and my one friend who was actually the original guitar player at Overkill that I met from working at a heavy metal record store in Nanuet.
That Tapeville?
Yep. I told him that I wanted contest to meet Judas Priest when I was 12, and that I was friendly with them, and their tour managers, they left numbers and said, because Priest dug it. I was like the youngest Priest fan on the planet at that time. Then I told KK Downing, and he said, what do you want to be when you get older? And I said, I want to be like you. And I said that when I was 12, right to KK Downing, right to his face. And they just they thought it was awesome. And they were getting me tickets and backstage passes. Like I won the contest at the Palladium, and I was able to take the bus or the train to the Palladium when it was Priest and Maiden playing on Port and Ventry. So I saw 2 of the 3 shows there. Then I was in that Tapeville place. And I met that guy who told me he was the guitar player in Overkill, and mentioned to him that I knew Judas Priest. Of course, he laughed at me, but he said, well, hey, I'll drive you guys. So he drove me and at that time, I was probably 13. My brother was 15. Him and his girlfriend drove us to Asbury Park and to Philly to see Priest and Maiden. And it was just one of these things where from there, we became really good friends. He was the one who called me to tell me that Randy Rhoads died, was Rob from Overkill. Wow. Riff Thunder was his name. Then was Rob Pisaric. Now he's a music attorney. But he said, hey, there's a really cool club in New York City that has a Thursday night, kind of hangout night. Do you want to go? And I said, all right. So me and my brother drove to his house. He drove into the city. We did what we did usually. I'd go up to the security people, show my brother's ID, get through. My brother would go in 15 minutes later with the picture ID. I didn't remember the name. I wasn't drinking, but I was in there.
Right.
And that's where I had met the singer from Heaven, and he was hanging out, and the guitar player, Mitch Perry, had just left the band. And I had cassette tapes on me of my band, because at that time, I think we were looking for a singer or something, but I said, hey, I hear you guys are looking for a guitar player. And I handed it to Alan Fryer, and he said, well, I'm going to California to audition some people tomorrow. And he called me from California and said, anybody with this Australian accent, damn bloody, isn't anybody great out here? I think when you get back home, mate, you're going to be in the band. And I was like, I'm a fucking 17-year-old kid, you know? And Alan was great. I played with him. Paul was the producer and manager at the time, and we were recording some music, a song that I actually wrote here. And it's called Boys Night Out. It's actually online. I haven't recorded it after I was out of the band. Alan loved that tune, but things with Paul and him didn't really continue. Their record deal fell apart, and I just developed a really good relationship with Paul and with Lieber Krebs, the management company that he was working with at the time, which just happened to be like the biggest rock and roll management ever. They had like Scorpions, AC/DC, Ted Nugent, Def Leppard. It was crazy. I would see walking in there every single day when I was, because he used to hang out in the management company. It was a whole different scene than it is now, And Paul said, well, I'm going to be producing this band Savatage, and I got some ideas about it. And I went in there and met the band when they were recording Hall of the Mountain King. And at that time, I actually did fly out and do a couple shows in California with Heaven. It was funny because we had Warrant opening for us. I had Warrant opening for Heaven when I played the West Coast, and I had Skid Row opening for Heaven when I played the East Coast, and all this was at 17. It's
amazing.
And I got back, and Paul said, I talked to Wendy Dio, and I got Savatage on the arena tour opening for Dio and Megadeth, and I want to have them add you in as another guitar player. And I heard Savatage on SOU because I heard Holocaust was the first song I ever heard. I freaking love that riff. And I always thought that was cool when you would hear Sirens. Of course, you weren't hearing Mountain King because it wasn't out yet.
Right.
So I was aware of who the band was. I got all their records. I learned every song. I knew them all, rhythm-wise anyway. And I was getting ready to leave my house in December to go on this tour. I was told I had this gig. And then the manager called me up one day, not Paul, the guy who was his partner, and said, hey, the guys down there, they have somebody in Florida they want to use, man. I'm really sorry about that. And I said, no. I said, they don't have somebody they want to use. I said, this is my gig. And I said, I know these songs. There's something about this band. I said, all right, let's do this. Let me fly myself to Florida, And at this point in time, I was 19. It just turned 19. I said, let me fly myself to Florida. And if they hate me, I'll eat the ticket and come home. If they like me, I'll stay in Florida and do the tour. And the band agreed. I flew to Tampa. Nobody showed up at the airport to get me. I took a taxi cab like an hour north where they lived, and they were like, oh, we know this dude. I'm like, yeah, you know this dude. And they said, what do you want to play? And I said, anything. And they laughed. Anything. I said, anything. And they went and picked the song The Whip, which I thought, they probably figured was really obscure because I might not know, like one of the ones that wasn't on the metal radio set. And we played it and we got through it, and they were just looking at each other because it was great. And then they're like, all right, well, we're going to do some one of the new ones we did 24 hours ago. And I think that I picked that maybe, but they got through that tune and they said, we'll be right back. They left the room, came back in. I had the gig. That's and awesome. It was just something that happened. When me and Chris Oliva played together, it sounded like Chris Oliva playing with Chris Oliva. It blew their minds, and the band was better than they were. It's like we were fuller when it went into, the lead in 24 hours ago. It didn't sound like a Van Halen record. Van Halen 1 when your one speaker wasn't working. You just heard bass. It was all of a sudden there was this other guitar and this stereo sound. And it's kind of how I laugh with some of these people now. They're talking about Savatage reunion. And like, first of all, we never broke up. And they go, well, Oliva's not going to be on the tour and there's no quote unquote original members. And I'm like, this is where you're wrong. I said, because before 1987, Savatage never had a fifth member. So technically, I'm the original Chris Caffery. So it's like you have the original me, because there wasn't a me before me in that band. The band was never more than 4. And they're like, yeah, I guess you're right. I said, yeah, okay, that's how I'm going to live with it anyway. And you know, Aliva's still in the band. He's just not able to do the shows, but that is how that had happened. You know, I just was in the right place at the right time, and I, you know, had the talent. It wasn't like, you know, with that demo tape that got me the gig, with Flying and Playing that got me the gig. I remember when I walked in the room and we were practicing to play some songs for, I don't know if it was before the one show we did in Florida. It might have been. We did one show in Florida at the fairgrounds down there. Steve Wackles called it the Nightmare at the Fairgrounds. It was before Halloween. Savatage was a really big local band at that, you know, huge local band at that time. And when I walked in and we played again after the Mountain King tour, when I was a member of the band, we went through, I think, Cheese and Love. And the band stopped and clapped. You know, they were just so happy because it was so freaking powerful when we played together. Then it enabled Chris to be a little bit more, you know, spontaneous live. He was going off on himself doing, you know, if you listen to the Ghost in the Ruins live record, he was playing different things and doing different things because he was able to jump off the rhythm parts.
It's really awesome. What I was at the TSO show at in Newark back in December, and you guys mentioned that, you know, Savatage is back, and that had escaped my radar prior to that. I know there was a thing, I guess it was 10 years ago, but like, why now? I mean, it's very exciting, but like, what was the behind the scenes that led to that?
Well, I never wanted it to stop. So me, it would have been 2003. It would have been, well, not 2025, but when we played Wacken, we had talked about it, you know, with Paul, and then Paul passed away a year and a half after that. So it took us a lot to get over that and go out on the road with TSO that year. And even so now it hits you really hard, but, you know, you want to keep his legacy alive. And I think that's part of that, is that, you know, Paul wanted the music to live. That's why he wanted TSO to be, he would always talk about, you know, guys, one day you're going to be turning over the torch and what you do to other musicians and singers. And Paul wanted the music to live on, and he's written and produce songs that are timeless. In my personal opinion, he would always say anybody could write a song about a car or a girl. It takes somebody really special could write a song that changes somebody's life. And I've seen that with this band. You know, his songs, I'll go to Europe and I'll see a kid from Egypt that comes out there and he's like, you know, Believe saved my life. And I started to understand where he was coming from with that, because as a little kid, I James Brown my way through all the lyrics. We didn't have lyrics in the LPs, right. So I didn't know exactly what they're saying, or nor did I really pay attention to it. Not at all. And then when bands were writing records and they were using fictional characters and things like that were not real, you know, but Paul's stuff, a lot of those songs could be you or people you know or people your friends know. And it just really connected in a different way with that. So we had COVID came then, so that extended to 2015 to 2000 thing. Then you had to get out of there. And then Aliva just did an interview with Rock Hard Magazine in Greece and mentioned that we were going to be doing a record and this and that, one last hurrah. He was kind of calling it then, but I think through that, a lot of bubbling started going through to management. I know I was getting a lot of messages. Are you guys going to be touring? Festivals would email me and I'd give them the contact for the management. And, you know, last year, management called us up and said, we want to do a conference call. And they said, we got a whole bunch of really good festival offers. What do you guys think? And I just basically started crying. I was like, let's go, you know? And, you know, I don't really think anybody realized how fast 2015 to 2025 would go. You blink your eyes and, you know, you're passing the opportunity probably to make it happen, you know? And I think it's a really good time. There's a couple decades of fans that have never had a chance to see us, and it's really cool music, and we're really excited to get back out there and have that again. For me, it's just a big missing piece of me that never left me, but it was, you always felt a little empty when it wasn't going on. You'd look at the festivals and you'd see your friends playing, and it's not about the money or what you could say online that you were doing in this. It's just, that was me, you know. It's like I woke up, I looked at my day, I looked at my month, looked at my year, and it was always had a part of Savatage in it for a very long time, you know. And it was just a lot of my heart and soul was in that music. We got to do a bunch of that stuff live with TSO, but there was just a different thing that happens when you're in front of those metal crowds with a metal band. And I was able to experience it with people like Doro and Metal Church. And I never joined another band, you know. I just was waiting and hopefully that I would get to see that day. So, you know, I always told all the fans, and they asked, I said my crystal ball was dead, but the second it happens, I'll be there. And that's it.
That's awesome. I mean, for me personally, like, it was the Christmas time, 1995 or 6 or something. And I heard, you know, on Q1043, the tail end of the Christmas Eve. And I'm like, what is this? And then obviously that song blew up, and the music video, and the little girl on the piano and the ripping guitars. And then I went backwards. I went to my guitar teacher. I'm like, what's Savatage? And then we went backwards, and I you know, filled in the gaps. It's epic music. That I was explaining it to my son when I said we were doing this interview. I was like, yeah, it's epic music, and it is symphonic, and it tells a story, and it doesn't exist like this. It's like this. And I love that. So I'm very excited.
Yeah, no, and Paul added in that element of rock theater and just the size of the show we had. And he's always been that way. I remember when Heaven played Lemoore East in Queens. I think that's the show that one of the shows Skid Row had opened for. And I remember him going, well, I don't know exactly how much we're going to be able to pay you guys, because I decided to get, I think at the time he decided to spend an extra $3,000 on lights, which is a lot of money back then. You know, it was like 86. Like, wow. Spent a lot of our guarantee for the show guarantee on extra lights. And it was just the way he was, you know, and it was a visionary, and very rare that people not only have those ideas that make them happen, but then to make them happen on the levels he did as consistently as he did is insane. I mean, I remember I was talking to him about something when we were writing the Wake 'Em to Magellan record, and I forget what it was, but he was just like, listen, Chris, when TSO headlines arenas, we hadn't even released the record yet. This was 96, probably November or October, and I was in Florida writing with John, and we had not released the first TSO record yet. And he's already when TSO headlines arenas. And then once we were headlining arenas, he said, now when TSO headlines stadiums. And you know, when you look at the fact that TSO East can do 2 shows at the Prudential, and TSO West can do 2 shows at the place in Dallas, Texas. And those 2 shows can add up, you know, 4 shows in one day can add up to over 50,000 people. He's playing stadiums, you know. It's like, it was just a magical kind of person that was able to make the craziest, what you would think would be the craziest things happen. And, you know, he had this way. I mean, Savatage and all the music we've done with TSO, it's not like it was ever written to be like somebody. It was just written. And Paul never cared what the record companies thought we should do. He never cared about that kind of thing, because if you were to say something to him and it'd be like, you know, nobody likes this, whether it be a piece of artwork, a record cover, merchandise, whatever, he would always turn around, look at you and go, not yet. And it was just that kind of thing where he just had that belief and that, you know, laser focus that made everything happen.
It's incredible music, man. This Christmas Day is my favorite Christmas song of all time. The solos at the end, like, it makes me emotional every year when I listen to it. I have a separate question connected to the epicness of all of it, tied into the TSO. You know, when you have like 8 to 10 weeks that band is out there, you're doing 2 shows a day. There's two entire productions out there. Tying it into what we do here, a lot of our students are on the beginning of their journey, and nerves and stage fright and things like that are a huge factor. when you're in a pressure cooker environment like that, where there's two shows happening and the stamina of it all, and like, what is your process in all of that, maybe in the beginning, and how has it changed over, the decades of that?
Well, the funny thing is, I'm more comfortable on stage than I am in front of 10 people. If somebody had me play in a music store, I would be more nervous than I am at the Garden, So it's like, I felt a comfort there. The only time I really would get nervous, especially when in-ears started to be used all the time, is when you had to do like a slow intro to a song and you were the only person being heard, because then all of a sudden every little tiny mistake to you sounds like, you just broke your favorite glass mirror or something. It's just like, it hits you, and then if you start to shake at that point, you just, now you're waiting for this part to get done, and that kind of stage fright nerves get to you. But I mean, for the most part, I'm pretty comfortable up there. So you have different moments in the show that are different levels emotionally, musically. If you had I'm practicing and warming up a lot more now, getting ready for Savatage, because I'm going to need to be out of the gate like pretty brutal on everything. People are going to microscope every note I play, so I'm really preparing myself for that. Not like I didn't with TSO, but you were able sometimes to pad yourself on some of the power chord ballads and some of the more rhythmic patterns that would happen instrumentally. There are less elements for you to be heard individually. So it's just it's one of these things. I always try to stay in shape. I watch my parents, my friends' parents, other people my age, how their muscles will age and they won't be able to do what they used to do. So I know what the schedule is like. I can't run around after the show and hang out for hours with everybody and be Mr. Backstage. It's like, in between those matinee shows and evening shows, I'm resting. After the evening show, I'm resting. I get up in the morning. I used to walk around places where we were, even on matinee days. Now if it's somewhere really special that I want to do something, I maybe do that. But I pad up on my rest and save the energy for the stage. And I don't really have that much nervousness. I think since I talk to the audience every year, I try to say at least something a little bit different that's kind of funny, and I like to have a line that kind of lives through the tour. So if anything, the month before we do the first show, I'm nervous about that. What's going to be that line that I'm going to say that carries through my narration parts of the show, which are the time when you're really microscope because you're the only thing there. It's not, but that's about it. I mean, it's just a lot of fun, and with the production and everything that you get to be a part of up there, it's I tell everybody, the greatest playground on the planet.
I mean, it looks like you guys are having a ton of fun running into the crowd, and then the risers are going up, and like the showmanship never seems to suffer. So it shows that the time and effort put into it. It's funny which parts stick with people. So we were at that show back in December. My son is 13 and he had not seen that band before. So he didn't know what to expect, and he didn't realize it was going to be a whole album and then the hits. And he was most surprised by your narration between the parts and the talking, and you're pointing at people and, "Hi, Dave," and everyone doing that stuff. And that's what stuck in his mind as the most fun part of the show, was the energy you brought as you were speaking to the crowd.
Yeah, it's become something that like I said, I've always been comfortable with that role, but I think it's something that really connects the band to that crowd, because I don't go up there and act any differently to people, because I don't think I am any different. I think I have a good job. I don't believe the hype. I'm not any different than any person that's in that audience, other than what I'm doing at that particular time. And that's, I think, the kind of thing that comes across on it, and Paul, at a very early time in the going with this, had told me that he wanted me to go, to a real safe zone he wanted me to be funny, but he wanted me to stay in a safe zone. And that safe zone that I discovered worked the best is the more I cut myself down, the funnier the crowd thought it was. And then it just has this human element that, the guy's up there cracking jokes about himself. And it just made it seem like, in the way this world, either people are projecting anger at somebody or they're making jokes about somebody that may not be that funny to other people. It's like, here in the midst of all that, here's this guy that's headlining arenas and he's laughing. We're laughing at him and he's laughing at it. And I think it gives a really positive channel of my energy and the band's energy and the message of TSO and the positiveness, because it's like when Paul talks about a single act of kindness that people could do, that, for me, that's like a single act of what I'm doing at that particular time that's drawing people out of, not everybody is angry. Not everybody is that one-sided. And I was taught by Paul how to do that, to just speak to these people and, get them all to laugh. And I figured out that my best formula to do that was to make fun of myself.
I'm self-deprecating as
and
well.
I'm perfect for that too, because there's a lot of, I have a lot of unperfect errors that happen all the time. So I could just run my regular life and it's funny. So
I get it, dude. I totally do. Let's talk some gear for a moment. At the end, I'm going to do sort of a rapid fire gear thing, but just real quick, over the course of that particular show, and I imagine every show, you're cycling through many guitars and different tones and things. If you had to be trapped on a desert island and you could have one guitar, one amp, and one pedal, what would you live the rest of your days with?
Well, when I first thought about that, I was like, well, wait a second, are we going to have power? So,
yes, you have power. Yes, yes.
You do have
power, and batteries, and yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think if I could have the perfect thing for a desert island, I'd want to have a Marshall 900 and a nice 412, even though, there's two scenarios for this. If I could have one in my grass hut out on the porch, I'd have that, and I would be running it out, through my 1101, which is what I use on stage with TSO. And I would go through the return of the Marshall and use it for volume. And I would use the 1101's pedal board, which you can go through all the effects. And I probably would take my black Gibson V that Paul O'Neill actually bought for me, because it accepts tuning really well and you could change it and it's aging crazy great. And it doesn't need a stand. So Flying V does not need a guitar stand, which would probably be the smartest. And like I said, if you had your second scenario when you wanted to go to the beach or somewhere else on the island, the Fender Tone Pro is a really cool new unit. It's a floor pedal that has all the sounds. And I got one of those little head rush monitors. So you go out of that into that, and it's crazy loud and it's crazy fun. And I'd take one of those little, chargeable USB wirelesses so I could walk around the beach and play out of that thing and have all those different sounds, because that would be fun. I mean, I take actually a tiny little Black Star amp that's got a delay and gain on it with the little tiny wirelesses down on my beach, and I'll play with that and stuff. That's what I have up on my coffee table in my living room when I'm watching TV. And I have 3 guitars stacked on top of each other right now as I'm playing through the songs, because the Savatage records have, some stuff, the older stuff was whole step down, but then some of the stuff like the song chants were only a half, but it still was scale. And then a lot of the stuff with 440, some grabbing different guitars to play along with the records while I'm watching TV, and I'm using that. I can pull up YouTube and run it through my studio here and my new Pro Tools and everything. I'm able to play the YouTube and play through my my rig, which is great because I have the 1101 run through here, and with my Pro Tools, it's pretty close to. This is pretty much my live sound. It's freaking really good. It's a great sound.
That is a great sound.
this too, which is
That's epic.
You know, and that's this guitar I'm actually going to bring on the road this time. It's this White Rose I haven't used, I think, since I was out on my Faces tour, but this is a really good one. And that one I'm going to bring, and I have my Kelly I'm going to bring, and trying to decide, because South America I'm not able to bring a ton of guitars for the shipping reasons, but I'm working it out right now. Probably, one more of my Rhodes. I have a Sunburst Rhodes that I was using on the Poets tour that I really like a lot. That's probably going to go, and then from there I'm kind of battling out what's going to be the last ones to go. And actually speaking to Dean Zielinski, and if in a perfect world he might have something built for me before we leave too. So
that's very cool.
Ski guitars, I was like trying to discuss to him about getting maybe a gargoyle done with his laser cutter. So I'm working on some ideas with him. But time is running short, but Dean can work fast. He's the man. He's the master.
That's very cool. What are your thoughts on digital versus tube amps? Like, are you guys noiseless on stage? Is there cabinets? Are they in ISO?
Well, TSO we don't have. Al has a bunch of ISO cabs and he runs heads, but I have been really fond of my 1101. There's tubes in the 1101, so there's some of the tube elements going on out of that unit. It's pretty simple. It's not really got 9 million different versions of anything in it. I keep using the oldest one they have. I mean, I have right here, I have a Kemper. I do have the Tone Pro. I've got on this rack here, I've got old pods and other things down there. I forget what the one is. Oh, there's a Rocktron thing down. A bunch of different things that I've tried, and I just have always gone back to this. My thing is I'm so challenged hearing wise as time has gone on, that it's better for me to have a digital sound, because this way, if it sounds different to me the next day, it's me. You're not moving
consistency.
You're not knowing what's wrong with this amp. You're not changing your strings. It's you trust in what is in the digital sounds. I'm able, like I said, to run that 1101 through the return of any good amp head and just use that amp head as a slave. So when I'm playing live, I'm able to get that amp behind me, and that helps a lot too. Even if you're using the in-ears when you're doing the metal stuff, you're able to have the speakers and the resonance if you get out of a floor wedge to get some of those feedbacks that you may be too far away from the PA to get the guitar to take over. But I'm all right with it. I love amps, and I could go either way if it was really a good option. But when you travel to a lot of these places, you get to a lot of these heads. It's like you don't know how many people used it the last week, especially in the summertime, and it could blow up on you right in the middle of the show. So I just kind of do the safe way with that, like I said, for a couple reasons, because of my ears and because of that kind of factor. I mean, I always use a 9-volt pedal board on top of every distortion pedal, because that little bit of that analog world makes a difference. You hear the difference. It gets into the rig and you notice that difference. It happens in there. And
which pedal is that?
It also helps when you go to different power sources, whether it's 220 or 110, regardless. A lot of these stages will have different power generators, and it may not be the truest 220 or the converters they have might not be giving you the most amount of 110. So you get a lot less gain sometimes. And having that extra little pedal, you can sit there and adjust your gain to marry what's going on. Some of the countries we're in, we were being given wirelesses we had to use for the guitars, and a lot of those packs could not have the gain up, it's less power out of that than you would have had out of your own wireless pack. So just to be safe, I always have one that I'm able to get to, and I start playing, and I can hear and feel how much gain I have coming out of my rig, and that's a very helpful thing to do. But so I'm kind of like a weird mixture of everything. But I mean, I like a lot of the new wireless units. I don't notice any loss from the cables with that at all. So it's better to get the cable out of the way with me, because I'll either trip on it or I'll wrap it up like spaghetti. So it's just it's not good. I can't fold laundry, and I can't wind cables.
That's okay. You are to be forgiven.
Yeah.
The wireless technology in the last like 5 to 10 years has just leapfrogged to the point where it's the loss is so
Yeah, they've made it fun too with these little units that plug straight into the amp,
yeah.
the size of your freaking 3 of your fingers, and the same thing goes on your guitar. Then you don't need to do the cables everywhere, and most circumstances those things are fine on any stage that's I used that when I did Doro shows last year, and I never had a signal thing anywhere, and not a problem at all with these little ones that I was using. And I like the fact that they're USB chargeable, and they have this little one had the charging case, so you just put it in there and plug it in, and even at rehearsals, you're not stumbling over. The cable's getting in the way right now here. I have a short cable going on to that, but when I'm upstairs in my living room, I use the little wireless, and I just move it from guitar to guitar, and it's smart enough to realize when I'm not using it, and it shuts itself off and everything like that. Smarter than me.
Totally. All right, I think it's time for our rapid fire this or that portion of the show. So the way it works is I'm going to say one thing or another thing. The answer is usually yes, but that's no fun. Or both, but that's also no fun. So feel free to defend an answer. Like I said, the answer is always yes or both, but ready?
Yeah.
All right, humbucker or single coil?
Depends on the guitar.
Right.
and the neck position. I mean, I would never, I would have a Strat and use a humbucker by the bridge, but I would never put a humbucker by the neck of a Strat.
Okay. All right. If you were using a Fender style guitar, would you prefer a Strat or a Tele?
I'm a Strat guy for the most part. I like Teles. I don't, really haven't performed one. It's funny because one of the Dean Zielinski's new guitars that I like is his one that's more Tele style, and I'm really fast on that. When somewhere in here there's the first Charvel ad in the Gutter Ballet video. Chris Oliva is using a white Charvel Tele, and I'm using a black Charvel Predator. Charvel gave him the Predator, gave me the Tele. He liked the white Tele. We exchanged that as Christmas presents, and we filmed that video in December that year, freezing. And if I was to be getting Dean to put a gargoyle onto a guitar, I was doing that because of the fact that I gave Chris that Tele and he used it in the Gutter video, and I didn't want to imitate his gargoyle guitar. I wanted to make a gargoyle guitar, and having the Tele style that Zielinski has, and actually he does have, it's like a humbucker single in the middle kind of setup with that, so you could still have the neck that has the double coil in it. For that one, I think will be pretty cool. So
very cool. For a Gibson style guitar, would you prefer a Les Paul or an SG?
It depends on how my back feels. I have an SG that's so light, and I take it everywhere because it's so light. And it's like this guitar. I mean, my Les Paul customs are freaking anchors. I love them. The tone is great, and I love those guitars. But there are a couple of mine. My Ace Frehley, my white one, my old Creamer Andy Rhodes like one. They're all so heavy. I mean, I have like my black Les Paul's freaking heavy. So weight wise, I would have to say the SG.
Okay. If you had a preference, would you prefer a guitar with a tremolo of some sort, or a stop tailpiece?
Well, if there was a tremolo, I block them. So I don't want the ability for the temperature to make that move. So I like having a tremolo. I think it's fun. My desert island guitar didn't have one. It's like I don't want to have to, especially if it's a Floyd, I don't want to have to sit there and use that little thingy to change a string. I'd rather just freaking put a regular string on. So
that's so funny. Students will come in here like once a month and they get their metal guitar with the Floyd on it. I'm like, we're gonna have to take a month to teach you how to restring that thing because it is work.
Well, the funny thing about that is my original guitars were all non-tremolo, and I think if I had one on it, it was a Kaler. I had some DC Riches that I don't think had a Floyd. And when Savatage did the Mountain King tour, they were playing with Megadeth, and I became pretty good friends with Megadeth. And at that point in time, their guitar tech had gotten fired, and Dave came up to me and he's like, "Hey man, do you know how to do Floyd Roses?" And I'm like, "I'm not great at it." And because they were going to have me go and stay on the road with them to do the guitar teching for Jeff Young at that time. And you know, if you didn't know, when Chuck Bueller was the guitar player, the drummer of Megadeth, his drum tech on the So Far So Good So What tour was Nick Menza. So it wasn't exactly a bad place to be, being a tech in Megadeth, if Mustaine wound up liking it. So yeah, I didn't feel I was confident enough in my abilities to do that. Plus it was Mustaine, so I didn't want to piss him off. But.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Guitar picks: thin, medium, or a thick gauged pick?
Well, I mean, acoustics, I like thinner ones. Savatage, old school, I use picks with a point. I use metal ones, really thick metal ones. Wow. One in my cup here, in the magic cup. Yeah, there's one here. I think there is. Yeah, this is the and this is it's a decently thick metal pick, and it's got an ability to go fast. That's different. You know, if that tip is really good. And then you'll hear a lot of the sounds that happen with some of those songs that are definitely brighter, and they jump out better with that. There's some decent plastic ones that are pointed. I mean, with TSO live, I'm usually on a thicker Dunlop pick that will have a point. You know, most of them I try to make sure the picks have some form of a point on them, and if not, I'll grind that out of a piece of carpet. I was hitting my my tech the last few times to take a box cutter and do like a crisscross on each side of it, because I sweat a lot on stage, and they slide out of your hands. So that I like too. So I actually have there's a company in, I believe it was, I want to say Denmark, but it might not be. It might have actually been like the Ukraine or Croatia or something. I saw this guy's picks. My guitar tech Hoogie, he does who's he out with now? But he was out with Five Finger and a bunch of other. He's great, and he does A&R stuff for Rev. To this company, because we were looking for metal picks, and he showed me this company overseas that was making them, and this guy sent me some. They should be here any day, and they actually have the S from the Savatage logo cut into it, so that hole was going to be there to hold. And that's awesome. Went, and I showed him a picture, and he cut one that's pretty much identical to the ones I have. So I'm really excited to get that. But yeah, I mean, for acoustics, I sometimes will, take kind of like, these are any ones that you could flip. Just like mediums, I think are great for that. Thins are sometimes maybe a little too thin, and you tend to snap them, especially if you play them too long.
I know Hoogie. We were staying at the same hotel for NAMM this year, and I would chat as we're getting coffee, and then I talked to him at the Rev booth for a while.
Yeah, Hoogie is you never have to worry about getting yourself on the internet if Hoogie is your tech. He's he's Mr. Social, so he's great. He's awesome. I always tell people sometimes I think he's too good. I don't, but he's great.
Yeah, he's always been very nice to me. All right, we're gonna shift here to effects. Okay, so if you had to choose, and this one it's both, but if you had to pick delay or reverb,
delay.
Okay. Phaser or chorus?
For lead, phaser. For cleans, chorus.
Fair answer. I like it. Okay, and then the last section here, this is like some band related ones, and this is where you're really gonna we're getting along and you're thinking, oh, Rob's all right, you're gonna hate me, so I'm sorry. Beatles or Stones?
Beatles or Stones?
Mm,
Did you just say Beatles or Stones?
I did. I'm sorry. You can click out if you want
I
to.
mean, Beatles is. I'm a little deaf sometimes. Beatles for me, just because I love the Stones, and I'm so and like I'll watch Keith Richards play, and his guitar playing is insane. The years that he's been putting into that playing and that style, and I watch him do those riffs. He's on a different level than most of the people I play with, just because of how effortlessly legendary the way he plays those little things are. But I mean, I was a Beatles fan as a kid, so
Right.
I have to go there. I think the artisticness of the Beatles too, and the creativity side. Stones be listed as the greatest rock and roll band ever, but I think the Beatles were probably one of the most influential and important bands that ever existed.
Okay. Within the Beatles, is it John or is it Paul?
Paul. I think Paul really. I love John Lennon. I think he was very funny. They all had that great sense of humor, and John definitely was very vocal on how he was as a person and this and that. But I just think Paul, since it's hard because you haven't had a chance to get the extra decades out of John Lennon that you got out of Paul, but it's just how much life is not life without music. So Paul McCartney is insane. What he's doing at his age and the amount of music he left. You got to think about it this way. The number one selling band of the 60s was the Beatles. The number one selling band of the 70s was Paul McCartney and Wings. So it's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I'm a Paul guy also for similar reasons.
Yeah.
All right, brother. My last question for you is the industry is ever changing, and it's certainly different now than it was 10 years ago and 20 years ago and 30 years ago. What advice would you give, being that you've had a pretty amazing trajectory of your career, but what advice would you give someone who's starting brand new today? And or what advice would you give yourself if you were starting brand new today?
To kids, 1 + 1 is 3. And as much as it's 2, somebody's going to tell you it's 3, and you're going to have to smile and deal with it. The business makes no sense. I always tell people, if you're too smart, don't get in unless you really have that element where you're able to accept the wrong, nod your head, go, because the critics are terrible. The businesses, especially in the old days when record sales mattered, it's all you heard was how to do it. I think it's, if it's what you want to do, you better dive into it. Don't half-ass it and then say, oh, I wanted to be, because it's like, unless you gave it your all, you never really knew if that could have happened. And, being in the right place at the right time had a lot to do with where I am. So as much as you like being home on your computer and this and that is helpful, but make sure if that is what you're doing, you're paying attention to what is going on, because through there could be the greatest gig in the world that you miss. In the old days, when I was out in the clubs, you had to find them. Now in the new days, you could see so-and-so's looking for a guitar player. So depending on how you're making your world, if you're relying on being online as your source, stay up on things, try to stay ahead of what's going on too, and don't make any decisions too fast. I did that as a kid. I left Savatage to go work with my brother, and I think that decision was probably made a little bit too fast. Although back then, you were a band whore if you played in more than one band. Mm-hmm. You couldn't be in 18 bands like you can now. I'm not going to name names, but there's an awful lot of people I know that have 73 bands they're in right now, and it's like, I get it, but back then it wasn't the way it was. So I would say you know, just be the best you can possibly be. Like I always tell people, I'm the best Chris Caffery on the planet. You know, whether or not it depends on what context you want to take that in. You know, I had Kid Rock tell me I was one of the best arena frontmans he had ever seen in his life. A compliment like that coming from him, you know. I have myself in two, I think, of the most incredibly amazing metal bands and progressive metal bands in the history. It's like I wound up getting into the really good family with TSO and Savatage, and just don't screw it up. You know, I was able to get back in, and so many people have messed up their careers too. It's so easy to believe the hype, and everybody wants to be your friend when you're on the top, because the highs are so high and the lows are so low, and that incredible want for what it is that you had. You know, it's amazing. You know, when you look at the lyrics for that whole entire Streets record, you know, there's a lot of that in there. You know, and the crowds are gone, and you the person that's like crying to himself, talking about how much he never wanted to leave, you know, with Savatage. You know, it's that whole line that he used at the end of Believe, you know, I never wanted to know, I always want, you know, that
Mm-hmm.
that whole kind of thing. I mean, there's so much emotion in this business, and we all take it very personally. I mean, I deal with it when I do my hot sauce stuff. You know, I make something, I create, and I spend a lot of time on it. I want people to like it. Then they'll go and eat hot sauce, and even worse than music, somebody will say it sucks because everybody has a different taste bud. You know, but with music, you would do a record, and man, it's a freaking roller coaster ride. One person would give you 10 out of 10 on the reviews, and one person would give you 2 out of 10. And then one person would say your voice sounds great. The other person would be, that guy's music would be cool if you got a singer. And you're just sitting there, and it's just like, darn, it's like having a girlfriend. I mean, they never make any sense, and neither do these freaking critics. So it's like you just have to nod your head and go 1 + 1 is 3.
Yeah.
Like I said,
I love that so much.
it's basically where it's at. So. And we're starting to remember, your best friend is your dog.
Yeah, they'll love you no matter what.
Yeah.
Dude, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. You gave a ton of great information that I'm sure many people are going to learn from. I look forward to everything that's coming up musically in your world, and I wish you the best, man. Thank you so much.
No, I thank you very much, and you have a great day, and everybody will hopefully see one of you or all of you somewhere on the road with either TSO or Savatage somewhere really soon. And thank you for making the things that are part of my life part of yours.
Absolutely, man. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, brother.
See you.